Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul?
and Jolene. And today we're talking about what is the best sci-fi RPG?
That's right. We're going to make a lot of people angry.
Okay. Go for it.
Space Opera from Fantasy Games Unlimited, 1981. No, you came up with this one, and I was like, wow. There's a lot of sci-fi out there. Not as much as, let's say, medieval fantasy role-playing games, but sci-fi, now there's quite a few games out there. And there's even different iterations of popular IPs like Star Trek and Star Wars. I decided that it would be a good idea to run through what I think are probably the best, most famous versions of sci-fi out there.
Okay.
So for me, there's different categories even that we can say which ones are the best in these categories. For example, there's science fantasy. And science fantasy is basically Star Wars, right? That idea that things are fantastical and we just say they're fantastical because it's super science that makes it magical, right? Except for maybe the Force. The Force is this mystic old religion idea and that people have powers. Now, they could have tried to go the science route and call them psionics, that due to their massive brains or something that causes people to be able to use the Force, or basically it's like mental abilities. They didn't go that route. They went with midichlorians, which everybody hates, I think.
At least Saul does.
Uniformly, it is the most terrible
Anyway.
thing to happen in Star Wars
Anyway.
movies. But let's say there is Star Wars games. So the first one I think is D6 Star Wars by West End Games, which is really weird because it came out pretty early. It was out in the early '80s, around there, which is amazing because I loved Star Wars and I was a big RPG fan, and I never played D6 Star Wars. And D6 Star Wars is a big game for anybody my age, usually, because they're like, oh man, D6 or West End Game Star Wars was a blast. It was fantastic. And the system was real easy and all this other stuff. They say that it kind of got broken as you got really high levels as a character, because I don't know if the person was being glib, but I was listening to a podcast, and the guy goes, "Yeah, I got so high level that I shot down a starship with a blaster, a hand blast." Sounds kind of crazy, but he said in the early stages it was a lot of fun. It was just like Star Wars, so I didn't play that game. I heard good things about it, and they even came out with the 30th anniversary of that edition. So 30th edition came out about, yeah, it must have been the early 80s, the 84, 85 that it came out. So right around when I was a teenager, I should have been able to get this book and play this game. Never did. So Star Wars has that iteration. It has the Fantasy Flight. I can't forget the D20 version of Star Wars, which was owned by Wizards of the Coast, put out by Wizards of the Coast. They made the D20 version, and they had a 3.5 version of it. And then they also came out with a Saga edition, which was their version of a 4th edition D&D Star Wars. I owned the book, but I never played it or really looked at it. I did run a little bit of D20 Star Wars with my son and his friends, but it was really just a few games and nothing stuck, and it wasn't ever really a long campaign. The big problem with that one is levels. It's very D&D like. You progress in levels, you go up in levels, you get more powerful, you get more hit points. Interesting game. I think if you really wanted to play Star Wars and you were really into 3.0 or 3.5, this worked just fine for you. Then they lost the license. Not West End Games. West End Games lost the license. It went to Wizards of the Coast, and Wizards of the Coast lost the license and went to Fantasy Flight Games Unlimited. Nope, just Fantasy Flight Games, and FFG. And there's the ones with the funky dice. It has all these symbols. You roll a bunch of dice, you get dice. You roll dice pools, and these dice pools tell you if you succeed or don't succeed. They succeed with a complication or with triumph results, right? I thought this was, when I first read this, I thought it was an excellent system. I thought it was really interesting. I really liked the idea behind all these funky dice and what could happen. And the famous example of how these dice could tell a story is that you can succeed but have a complication. Like, you could still do what you want to do, but something bad can still happen to you. The best example that I remember is straight from a movie, Star Wars, is when Han Solo is running down the hallway, right? Or he's going down the hallway and he comes across a bunch of stormtroopers, and he's just yelling and charging them. And they all stormtroopers get really scared and they start running away from him, right? A whole bunch of them, like let's say like 5, 6, 10 of them, I forget how many. And they're running into one of those circular hallways in Star Wars. And then they bust through these doors, and then he's chasing them, and then all of a sudden there's like a whole bunch, there's like a whole battalion of troopers and bad guys there, and they all have their guns trained at him. So he turns around and runs back, right? So he succeeds in trying to get the stormtroopers out of the area so the rest of the group can go by or do something, and he chases them out of there using only his one blaster and his intimidation roll, right? He succeeds intimidation roll beautifully, but he has a complication at the end, and that's where he meets the end and has the complication. All these guys ready for him. I thought it was amazing. I go, this is a great system. The problem was these dice, right? You had to figure out what these symbols meant, and some canceled each other out, and then you were some good things, and then the other dice cancel it out, and then you got to figure out the results. And I played this game a little while, and it worked. The system works pretty good, but a lot of people, either they get the dice or they don't. I didn't really get the dice too well. I kept having to put the dice together and
figure out what the symbols.
Yeah, and just move the dice away that cancel each other out. Where other people at my table were like, "Oh, this is the result." Boom. I'm like, wow. Now, I don't know if my brain is wired funny or whatever, but my brain never really worked that way. I like moving my dice together to cancel each other out of movement. And then people going, "Why are you doing that?" I go, "Well, because I need to know." And they go, "Can't you just look at them?" I go, "There's a lot of dice on the table." I really like the idea of Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars. And another thing is that they came out with 3 books. They came out Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, and Force and Destiny. And the problem I had with Fantasy Flight Games books is that they each had a copy of the rules at the very beginning, right? Because you have to have a copy of the rules. But which meant that when you bought these 400-page books, that you were paying for the same rules over and over again, because they had to put them in the different ages or the different books. So I thought that was kind of weird way of...
They wanted a standalone book for that thing.
Right. But they had 3 iterations of the ages, right? Or what kind of games you wanted to play. Edge of the Empire yeah, was where you're like off in Tatooine. You're kind of like a smuggler. There's not a lot of Empire running around. Every once in a while you come across them, but you're out in the frontier. Age of Rebellion, you are a part of the Rebel Alliance, and you're going on missions and stuff. And then Force and Destiny, you could be a Jedi apprentice and have Force skills and stuff like that and powers. And to me, that seemed like, well, it seemed kind of unbalanced, but they really do make it kind of balanced pretty well. So, not too long ago, they lost the license, or Asmodee decided that they bought out Fantasy Flight Games, and they made Fantasy Flight give up all their RPGs to, I think, Leading Edge Studios. I'm not sure, but I think that's what happened. And so Fantasy Flight Games does not make any more role-playing games. It only makes board games. So it went out of print, the FFG Star Wars. You can't get them anymore. But I think it's worth mentioning that it's a really good system, and I really liked it. That's number 1 probably in this section. Space Opera for me is probably my nostalgic best sci-fi game. I ran it for like 20 years. I ran it in a home game for a couple campaigns. I ran it at a convention. I ran a campaign at a convention with multiple players coming in and out of the game, just running it over and over again, and it was a lot of fun. It's very kind of broken, badly edited, very archaic, but still in my mind, it's a fun game. You played Space Opera. What did you think?
It's a lot of percentages.
Yes, there's
And
no
charts.
strategy.
But yeah, it was fun.
They have their own world. They get the world as it is in 1980, and they project that into space. So there's the Russians out there. They call them something else. The North American Trade Federation, whatever. They become the Federation of Space, and then there's the Mercantile League, which is I forget. I think that's probably England, Europe, Western Europe, and of course you have alien races out there and stuff like that. So it's a very archaic way of thinking, but they have a future history, which I think was pretty cool. It just lays everything out as to how things are. I really liked it. It's really neat. Mutant Chronicles. Now this is a sci-fi game, but it's very not ship orientated. It's only based basically on the moon or in the solar system in our solar system, and it's a 2D20 game system where, and this is the part where it's fantasy. Evil has been awakened in Uranus or something like that on some moon, and I don't know why I picked that planet, but I'm pretty sure that's the one. And it is kind of spreading this chaos toward Earth. So the first thing it starts hitting is electronic things. Things stop working very well, and things start getting run down. And then so what happens is kind of like technology reverts, right? Things get more clunky, they get bigger, and
That could be a problem if you're on the moon.
Yes, exactly. It's a dome city, but still could be problematic. They call it diesel punk, right? This idea that the things start getting breaking down, and then you revert to older types of technology to keep things going. Very interesting system. It's 2D20. It was the second 2D20 system, I think, right after Conan, and I really like it. And much like the idea behind FFG's Funky Dice system, the same person who wrote that rule set, it wrote this rule set. So just like that one, except it's much less complicated, where you have success and you could have a complication. It does it with just D20s, right? Right. So you could succeed, but if you roll a 20 on one of your dice, you have a complication. Simple. You don't have to look up these symbols on multiple dice and figure out that, and everybody knows a D20 on a 20. Usually in D&D is like, oh yeah, that's great. No, that's bad. So people go, and even in other iterations of that game, I ran a Roman game of that at a last convention, and once people realized that a 20 was bad, every time they saw 20, the whole table would go, oh, which is really cool, right? That's I really like about it. So it's almost the same idea, but the system is much better, and I like it. And then, like I said, the setting of Mutant Chronicles, I think it was a comic book. It's been a comic book. It used to be a board game. They have a board game. They just came out with a new board game of it, and it's really neat. I remember playing the board game years ago. It was a lot of fun, and the setting is super cool. Of course, I'm going to go into Warhammer 40K. FFG, again, came up with the rules for Warhammer 40K RPG. It's based on a percentile system. And much like other things FFG did, they went through, there's different editions. And they went to edition that had Funky Dice, a precursor to the Star Wars system. It never really went too far. I think it was called third edition. It came in a big box set. It had a bunch of good stuff, but people didn't like the system. It just didn't work for them. Later on, they went back to this percentile system, and different people have bought the different rights to the game. It went from FFG to somebody else, and it went from a percentile system to a D6 pool system. Now it's back to a percentile system by Cubicle 7, and the latest iteration of it is called Imperium Maledictus, and even though the original PDFs were terrible. They said, I mean, people really, if you go online to rpg.com and look at the reviews, people just blast the set of rules, right? Because they're terrible written. There's things missing. They're incomplete sentences. But there was one reviewer who wrote the terrible review of it a year later, says, "Oh my God, they've done so much work with this game that now it's really he basically said everything I complained about it in this game has been completely fixed." So I think it's pretty cool. They have to change the lore a little bit. They have to change the background setting. What do you call it? The automatic setting. They put the setting on a different planet, and so it makes it a different game. I think it's pretty cool. The little that I read about it, and it's really neat.
There you go.
Then there's Rifts. Let's talk about Rifts. Science fantasy. This is on Earth. It's science fiction because it's the future, but wormholes or gateways open, allowing demons and aliens to come to Earth. Earth is transformed. There's magical ley lines that are visible from space, which I thought was cool. When you opened up the Rift book, it had color pages in the middle, and some of those pages were like, the art was amazing. But it's Rifts, right? That's the problem.
Okay.
Rifts. It's not Rifts. Rifts is not the problem. It's the game system. It's a percentile system, but there's two different sets of damage. There's standard damage and mega damage. Standard damage is like 1, 2, 3, 10 hit points, and mega damage is hundreds of hit points. So can you imagine a creature doing hundreds of hit points to you, and another character doing tens of hit points to you, right? So it's very, very unbalanced. But who cares? The setting was freaking cool. I played it in this one Rift game years ago at the Dungeon Con, and it was fantastic. The GM was brilliant. And I didn't care that the glitter boy next to me was tossing railgun bullets 3 miles away and killing things. And my juicer, which was like this guy who uses drugs to do super cool stuff, was like, couldn't compare to that guy in a big old huge armored suit. But who cares? It's just the setting was really cool. I'm fighting demons and stuff like that, and he's killing tanks way 3 miles away. Pretty cool system. I mean, pretty good setting. The system, though, a little wonky. Did they come out with Rifts for Savage Worlds? They put out a box set, and then they put out another one with the new set of
Updated rules.
updated rules for
Savage Worlds.
because Savage Worlds changed. They changed a few things. I'm gonna throw out Fading Suns. There's another science fantasy. Now this one, I've played in a couple games way back a long time ago. I really love the idea behind it. It's this like Roman, it's science fiction. Man, people go to the stars. They're out there for, I think, thousands of years, right? Then in the setting, the stars start blinking out. They start disappearing, or whatever you want to call it. And they're trying to figure out what's going on. And they're worried about stuff. And it's, this darkness, whatever, is getting closer and closer. So it's kind of like this doom thing. But the setting is, at the time period, they went through like this Roman Baroque era. So they're all like very imperialistic and stuff like that. I think it's really neat. I liked it. They've come out with a 4th edition lately. It was kickstarted. I don't know how popular it is. I don't see this game played very much at conventions. I played in a game, but honestly could not figure out the system, even though I played 6 hours of it at a convention. The person who ran the game loved the setting, had the previous set, went through the Kickstarter, and he ran the game, but the game is all about setting to me, and this is a perfect game that the setting is really cool no matter what. Kind of like Shadowrun is to some people, like me. So we're going to shift gears, try to go to hard sci-fi. This is more like scientific science fiction. I only got a couple of them, and there's different iterations of these. One is Traveler. Traveler can be hard science fiction, where it deals more with the laws of physics as we know them, with a little bending of the rules, probably. Depending on what setting and what technological level you set the game at. The default setting is this massive Imperium but still you have the problem of messaging, right? There's no faster than light messaging. So the fastest messenger is the fastest ship you can get on and deliver messages.
So this is Traveler is a realistic space game bit, but it was created in the 70s, right? So the technology wasn't the idea of the technology was big giant computers.
Oh yeah,
different
just like space operas, right?
Yeah,
Space opera computers took
like
large
the whole
rooms.
room.
Yes.
Yeah,
And you kind of laugh at the processing power, right? Because they have examples, and like your phone could do more than
yes,
computers.
because that was back when you stuck a card into a computer,
A punch card.
a punch card
Yes,
to
yes.
tell it what to do.
There were tapes.
Yeah.
But the idea of floppy disks, remember those?
Yeah,
Yes, that stuff was breaking edge technology.
yeah, yes.
I'm not sure they had floppy disks back then.
But Traveler is more like a real sci-fi game, right? Where if you step out into space, you're gonna die,
Oh yeah.
and you're on a ship that if there's a hole or something
Oh
in
yeah,
it,
yeah,
you
yeah.
gotta
Decompression,
fix
all that
it.
stuff.
And
Like I said, and a lot depends on what tech level you set the game at.
I've never played in a game where the tech level was very high.
Right. But the idea that ships can travel faster than light by jumping. Like I said, this was kind of like the workaround, and instead of going into hyperspace, which may or may not exist, this really tried to deal with a little bit of a harder science fiction, and of course, try to be realistic.
Yes,
And I'm using air quotes.
he's using air quotes. You can't see it.
Even more trying to be realistic is the Expanse, because the Expanse is only in this
Solar system.
and there's no anti-grav, there's no shields, they still shooting bullets at each other, rail guns, which are things do exist, and they're talking about real distances between planets and how long it takes to get from one planet to another, and how you accelerate and decelerate. So the idea is you're accelerating, but then at halfway through the trip, you turn your ship around backwards and you put on your engines again to slow you down, and it takes you that long to slow you down to get to your destination, and then you maneuver to get to wherever you need to go to on a space station, moon, planet, blah blah blah. This is obviously based on the book, which is also which they also based a show on. If you've watched the movie or read the book, watched the show. Or read the books, this is the Expanse.
I would suggest watching the show and not reading the books. The books are freaking huge.
I actually read 3 or 4 of them.
I know.
I go through these reading phases where I can read big books, no problem, and a lot of that has to do with.
And a lot of that has to do with.
A lot of that has to do with me just sitting down and spending large amounts of time reading. Like reading right before I go to bed for like 10 or 15 minutes is not conducive to me finishing a book in less than. I've been reading the Path of Daggers for about 4 or 5 months. No.
Well, that's because you
4
only
months.
read a few minutes a day.
Correct. At some points in my life, I just sit down and read a book all the time. Those are the only 2 examples. Of course, Traveler has all kinds of spin-offs because you cannot copyright a mechanic like 2d6 rolled number 8 to succeed.
Right.
That cannot be copyrighted. You can copyright the background. You could copyright the setting, stuff like that. But game mechanics can't be, so people can use it even without a
Permission?
without permission or with like the OGL. You could not. You could still use the game mechanic D20 roll numbers and all that, but the people wanted to be able to use other things that were possibly copywritten. Anyway, so there's all kinds of games. There's a Mongoose Traveler, which is really good. There's Cepheus Engine, which is putting out a lot of material for that game, and a number of other science fiction games based on Traveler, but they tweak the system a little bit, make it their own, and come out with it. Other than that, I don't know of too many other hard science fiction games in that ilk where they're trying to be realistic. And I'm using air quotes again. How realistic can we be? We're not playing The Martian, right?
And the next category?
I'm going to just say it's sci-fi. I'm not sure where it fits in. I'm thinking It could be fantasy. It could be hard science fiction. It's somewhere dancing between those two. And I just like the settings, right? This is ultimately what it comes down to. Babylon 5. Is that science fiction? Is that science fantasy? They get
It's both.
they get kind of mystical on us
Yeah.
at times, I think. But
Well, there's Vorlons, which are there's like ancient races and stuff. So it's a very that part is they're helping us along. But then there's there's what you would consider hard science fiction because they have gates to jump. They built gates to go
through places.
Right.
Yes.
Versus other games where
Well, they can't travel faster than light except
No.
through gates.
that's what they do. They
Yeah.
gates, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're trying to be hard science fiction, but their setting is very fantastical, right? Because of the precursors, the forerunners, the old races, right? And they're almost magical.
Well, yeah,
Old races.
yeah.
But who knows how advanced people can be and what happens. And like, what was his name? Science fiction writer who said that science can be so advanced that to people who aren't as advanced, science seems magical,
Well, yeah.
right? I think he's a famous writer.
Anyway, Babylon 5.
So Babylon 5, there's a D20 version, I think of it. I think there is. It never became very popular. I've seen a few people playing it quite a long time ago at conventions. I don't even own a single Babylon 5 book, which is amazing. I think I do one book. I think I do have one book. Whoever owned the rights to it put out a few books. It wasn't very popular. The TV show, we watched the TV show religiously, really liked it. It's one of the few TV shows that we have the whole show on DVD. That's how much we liked it. And we see it. It's been a while since we watched it, but we've watched the show at least, 2 or 3 times in its entirety.
You've watched it 2 or 3 times. I've watched it more than that.
Well, cheated on me with the Babylon 5. I think if you notice that setting and you've seen the show, I think it's pretty cool. There's different adventures you can go on, different things that happen. You are on Babylon 5, which is it is a space station, a hub of diplomacy and exchange of different races and cultures and stuff like that. I think it's pretty cool. I think the idea behind it is really cool.
Well, and there's good and evil and gray areas and all kinds of different things.
Right. So it's not like, right, there is a lot of gray in that game and in that setting. And I really liked it. And I liked some of the things are really evil, you think, and then all of a sudden they're just a little bit misunderstood. The dark guys, the spidery guys.
No, I don't think they're misunderstood,
at all.
No.
They're just, they're just, I forget what their goal was, but at the end, I remember thinking, they're just looking out for themselves, and that's all.
Anyway, the next game.
The next game is Star Trek. I don't know where this one falls because they're traveling at, what is it?
Warp.
No, they even have another one. Transwarp speed, right? Super warp, or I don't know what they call it. Don't they have like something faster than warp speed? Transwarp or something?
The Federation doesn't.
Oh, okay. Maybe my mistake. But everybody knows Star Trek, a show from the 60s, died right away. Unbelievably.
There's 3 seasons.
Yeah, but I think they only aired 1 or 2. And I don't think they on the air when it first debuted. And they cut it, right? And then I think the movie, Star Trek the movie, was in the 80s.
That was, I think, wasn't it 79?
So a good 10 years later.
Right around there, yeah.
79, they came out with a movie. They came out with all the actors came back. A movie that'll put you to sleep.
That was the hard one.
Multiple times, I believe.
The first movie's not my favorite, but I have watched it. And
then slowly, what's funny is that show should have just died, right? It just should have died. But these people really got hooked on this show, right? And they started doing conventions. And all these people who were on the show were basically just actors who, sometimes didn't have a job for a long period of time. So they were being paid to go into these conventions. And these conventions were drawing, at first, a couple hundred people. And now they're like super huge, right? And they probably easily draw thousands of people. Depending on the
It,
show.
if you're at the Las Vegas show,
The Las
yes.
Vegas one, right? It happens in August. I would love to go to that thing, but the tickets are ridiculously expensive for my budget anyway. But there's plenty of people who go and pay that money, and it's super popular. So what had happened with Star Wars? I don't know. Star Trek. I don't know, but somehow it became a phenomenon again, right? So it went for 10 years. I think they had the animated TV show for Saturday morning. I don't remember watching that. I don't know when it was. I would think I would watch it, but I didn't. I don't remember a single episode I watched. And then I saw the movie. It was terrible. Well, okay, it was boring. I thought it was kind of interesting at the end, but a lot of people didn't like it.
Well, the second movie was good.
But then, yeah, Wrath of Khan, I think almost universally known as the best freaking Star Trek movie out there. You might say that Undivided Country or whatever it was, Undiscovered, I don't forget what it was.
Anyway.
The Klingon one was pretty cool. But Wrath of Khan, universally heralded as the best Star Trek movie made. It has Ricardo Montalban, come on, kicking ass. And it was a good movie. It was fantastic. It was action-oriented. And I think that based on Wrath of Khan, they made more movies. And then what year was...
It was in the 80s, late 80s, TNG.
Yeah, The Next Generation came out. So there's been a Star Trek game for a long time.
There was a Star Trek game in the 80s, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like it was like the same. Was it the same people that did the Star Wars?
No.
Was it the 2D6?
No. It wasn't that. It was, there's been different iterations, some not approved or not licensed. There was some that were. Honestly, I don't remember because I never played any of them. There was one from Task Force Games. There's been multiple games from that looked like Starship Fleet Battles or Fleet Battles that were they looked like Star Trek ships, but they weren't licensed. Mm-hmm. So everybody made these games. The Cypher came out with a set of rules for Star Trek. Unicorn Games came out for a system of Star Trek. There's all kinds of systems.
And the one that you play.
And then, of course, there's the D20 Star Trek Adventures, which came out a few years ago. And now it's going to get a second edition coming out anytime at the end of this summer. I think if you like the movies, like the TV show, Star Trek Adventures is fantastic. It does exactly what you want it to do. It gives you adventure. It gives you ability to figure things out, planning, on the hook diplomacy or not off the hook diplomacy. All kinds of things happen. I've run this game multiple times at different tables, for supposedly teenage tables to adult tables, at conventions, even at home, even though I messed up with the Shields part. I know. Sorry. I'll reiterate that story in a minute. But I think it's been relatively successful as far as me personally playing it and running it at conventions in my home. It's really fun. I really like it. Some people think it's a little bit too crunchy, but I think it works really well for Star Trek. And the D20 system doesn't hinder you being able to run this game or run the type of games that you see on the TV screen.
That you want to
play. And what's funny is that because of the momentum system and because of the momentum system, the idea that you're working together really is really reinforced by the momentum system. One of my I don't know what I'd call him, a friend on Facebook. He's in England. Never met the man. It's really nice. Matthew. He said about Conan, and what he didn't like about the D20 is that Conan system is that Conan is like you're a single person out there backstabbing everybody just to get whatever you want. So the idea of momentum of this group play coming together and doing things for each other, backing each other up, to him didn't seem Conan-like.
But you're not playing Conan.
Yeah, you mean the character Conan.
Right.
You're playing the game Conan.
Yeah.
Right. You're playing in the world of Conan. You have to come together to be able to survive.
Right.
Because you are not playing Conan, who's extremely lucky and extremely powerful. And a good example of why I disagree with Matthew, is that in the first Conan movie, he has a group of people that he is friends with that help him out. There's Mako, the sorcerer. There's the thief. I forget his name. And then there's, I I forget the girl's name.
Well, even in all the Robert Howard books, he has it's Robert Howard, right?
Robert E. Howard, yes, you got it.
He always runs into somebody that's
Right.
going
that
to work with
helps him
Yeah.
for a little while anyway.
Yeah.
Till they die.
Yeah.
Yes. Till they get killed. And Conan doesn't kill him.
No.
No. And I'm thinking of Matt's words is that how the momentum system makes it a group project, a group endeavor.
Which works well for Star Trek.
Which works well for Star Trek because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be this working for the Federation, though they did come out with becoming a Klingon and playing a Klingon now. But working together, trying to solve the situation, solving problems, and doing Star Trek kinds of stuff. And I think the momentum system really does bring that into the game. So it's a really good iteration of Star Trek.
The world.
Right? The idea behind Star Trek where people are working together, they're not working against each other. Or they're not out for themselves.
Mostly, yes.
They're working for a grand cause,
yes.
whatever that is. I'm going to throw in an alternative. The reason was this poor system never had a chance, right? This was a TSR / Wizards of the Coast sci-fi game. It came out in the early 2000s. Star Wars killed it. And I'll tell you why. So alternatively, it has a step system, which I thought was really interesting. If you get better at things, let's say you start with a D6 in a skill. Well, if you get better at things, you can be bumped up to like a D6 plus 2 or to a D8. And you're trying to roll higher, right? Well, you usually roll 2 dice, and 1 die is like the set die that your skill is or your attribute is, and your skill can be bumped up or down depending on the situation or depending on the circumstances. I really liked it. I thought it was really ingenious. I thought it was pretty cool.
It sounds very complicated.
No, it sounds complicated, but really in reality it isn't. And unlike those funky dice that I never got to do in my brain, this was really simple and I could do it in my brain. The problem was they signed a contract to do D20 Star Wars. Star Wars, the people who own the license goes, we don't want Wizards of the Coast to have another science fiction game to compete with Star Wars. So they killed Alternative Line.
I see. So that's not one you can probably get.
Oh yeah, you can get on eBay. The books are cheap, $10. If you maybe $15. People think because it's out of print that means it's valuable. No, it's not. That's not the way it works. I know a lot of people on eBay believe it is, the sellers, but no. If you go to a convention and they have a flea market, you'll find these books for like $5 a piece.
So there you go.
So go out and get it. And if anything, they're a very interesting read. There's a little bit of they have a setting.
So you didn't actually tell us what you thought was the best sci-fi RPG.
Sci-fi. What do you think? Give me one, and I'll answer in return how you're wrong.
How I'm wrong?
And why mine's better. Go ahead. Shoot.
I like, out of the ones you talked about, Space Opera was fun, although it was a percentile system and had lots of charts. I like the Star Trek Adventures, of course.
Of course.
I've never played in Babylon 5. And the only other one that I've played on here would be Traveler. And to say that I like Traveler would not be correct. I don't dislike it, but it's a very interesting because I had to use the 3 books, the little 3 black books. And it's a whole process just to get your character alive to the finish line to start the game. So
in your order, Star Trek Adventures #1, best game, and then under that was what?
Space Opera,
and then you played Traveler.
But those are the only ones I played though
Right.
in there.
Okay. I will agree right now from all these that I mentioned, and I don't think there's anything else that I can think of at the moment. The best science fiction game, Star Trek Adventures. I think it does everything it's supposed to do, how it's put out. The second edition is going to change some of those ideas. It's going to make it easier because of the way the system works. They're going to get rid of rolling a certain set of dice called the challenge dice, which determines how much damage you do. It's just going to be automatic damage depending on what weapon you use. So it's going to take a step out of rolling dice.
And what's your second favorite one there? It's going to be Star Wars, right?
No.
I'm shocked.
It's Space Opera. You know why it's Space Opera? Because Space Opera was based on a lot of things like Star Wars E.E. Doc's Lensman series. I don't know if you ever read that. That's from the 50s and 60s. I read the Lensman series when I was about 13, and it was freaking unbelievably fantastic. E.E. Doc Smith, go find his little books. They're fantastic. You can probably buy them for $1 at a flea market somewhere or somewhere. They're real tiny, easy to read, and of course, Space Opera ripped off Star Wars because they have psionics, which is basically the Force, and I used it not to run Star Wars, but I could have, and it would have been really easy. And I stuck with the home setting of Space Opera because it was just easier for me. And I have that nostalgic thing that I ran it for so long.
You like it.
I like it.
Yeah.
And it holds a lot of memories for me. I have a lot of memories of games that we played and things that we did.
So basically what you're saying is the best sci-fi RPG is whichever one you as people are running and like. Because it's going to be whatever system and stuff that you like, right? Because if you don't like Star Trek, then you're not going to enjoy Star Trek Adventures.
Correct.
But if you love Star Wars, then that's going to be your favorite thing. Whichever version you're running,
Correct.
Right?
When you try to make this best of things, it's not an objective decision, is what I'm saying. What we're saying.
Of course, it's going to be subjective,
And
whatever
it's
you like.
totally subjective,
Yeah.
right? Some people really love the idea of having characters that they can't plan, right? Like Traveler. You're gonna get
a guy with one leg that has no money, and here you go.
and what's funny is that your skills are randomly
Yes.
chosen for you, or whatever you want to call it. You roll.
Which means that if you want to drive something and you don't happen to have that kind of skill, you're probably not going to do very good at it.
Correct. If you want to be a pilot, there's no way you can be a pilot
No.
in the original Traveler. Now, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I think in manga.
But a lot of people love that, the idea of you're going to get what you get,
Yes,
and then you're going to go for it.
and you're gonna have to role play that character
Right.
out with all its flaws. Right? People love characters with flaws. Traveler's the game for you. If you want super fantastic characters, any Star Wars game is perfect because you get to choose what skills you want to be, what race you want to be, and bada bing, bada boom, you're what kind of character you want to play.
So there you go. You can always tell us what your favorite
Yes, you could always
sci-fi game is.
correct. Make your own list.
So
Share
here
with
you
us.
go. Or there you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul,
Angeline.
and you have a good day.